Great Depression was a time when America was desperate to get away from the Troubles. America's economic infrastructure collapsed and people were going hungry. People couldn't pay their bills. People wanted an escape. And that's when movies skyrocketed in popularity. In order to understand how audiovisual has advanced, we need to go back to the first film camera, the kintograph. In 1892, Edison developed the first film camera and the first movie camera by splicing together clips at frames. It went as fast as 12 frames per second, and the first film made to the public is the Roundhay Garden Scene of 1888. It's a short film directed by Louis Le Prince, which, while it's just 2.11 seconds long, it is technically a motion picture. This was also recorded at 12 frames per second. While we had video, we didn't have sound to go with the video, so they were silent and boring. Cinema chrophonograph, or phonorama, based on the work of inventor François Dussaud. Similar to the kintophone, the system required an individual use of earphones to sync up audio with the video. This allowed for speech to line up with the mouth of the film, making the film feeling more real to the audience. This is how movies were made for a long time, until color was put into the movie. In the late 30s, still in the Great Depression, video advances in color, creating movies that were made in Technicolor, a method that uses dye transfer technique to produce color print. The first movie in color is The Gulf Between, the only feature-length film using the Technicolor process #1, which was addictive two-color process, but was popularized color in movies, was The Wizard of Oz. After a tornado goes through Kansas, Dorothy Gale and her dog Toto are swept away from their home and into the colorful and vibrant land of Oz. In order to find their way back home, they must embark on a journey to the Emerald City, where the Wizard of Oz resides. This movie is about a magical place called Oz, and it has color. This made the movie feel magical and got more people interested in movies. By this time, people are fascinated with movies. Some even wanted to make their own. Some thought this would be great for family events instead of just seeing an old photograph. Well, Sony thought of this as well, and believed everyone should be able to record movies. In 1983, Sony released the Beta Movie, the world's first consumer camcorder, that recorded analog video on a standard Betamax cassette. The camera recorded up to 300 minutes. The JVC-GR-C1 was the second most popular portable all-in-one camcorder. The camera records onto a VHS-C format, the tape allowing it to be compatible with VCRs. The GR-C1 was only one of the few camcorders to use video tubes to produce a color image. The GR-C1 uses a half-inch high-band Staticon tube to produce 300 horizontal lines of resolution, or, as we know today, 300 pixels. That's some high-def video right there. Anyway, the GR-C1 is the most notable for being in Back to the Future, but is also notable for being in Stranger Things Season 2, a quite impressive camera for its time. Big corporations have made their forms of media, but we're here to talk about the physical cameras, not exactly the media and codecs and the formats that were used. However, we will talk about the codecs were used to the exact cameras talked about in this documentary. Tapes would stick around until the early 2000s, when Hitachi's MV100, the world's first DVD-ROM camcorder, was released in the year 2000, and established users to record their films directly to a DVD disc. This was great! Yeah, no, it sucked. DVD camcorders have been around for a long time. However, if you wanted to record over something like on a tape, you would have to wait for a DVD-RW to release. But even then, it was not great. When you would try to erase a recording, instead it would erase over the whole entire disc. This is what made DVD camcorders kind of unpopular. DVD camcorders were also not great for being shaky. If you barely moved too much, the DVD would skip and cause the video to look corrupt. Okay, this next bit is going to be about the compact flash era. And in order to explain why cameras advanced during this time, we need to go over compact flash and other types of flash memory. Compact flash is a flash memory mass storage device mainly used in portable electronic devices. The format was first manufactured by SanDisk in 1994. Compact flash became one of the most successful of the early memory card formats, surpassing the miniature card in smart media, except it wasn't popular enough and it was too expensive until the early 2000s. Sadly, compact flash only accepted photo formats at first, as did most cameras. This would be the standard for photos for a couple of years until the SD Card Association, or SDA, allowed for use in portable devices. It was introduced in 1999 as a joint effort between SanDisk and Panasonic and Toshiba as an improvement over multimedia cards, MMC. Again, these formats were very new and were not really accepted until the late 2000s. What's next, you ask? Now that you know about the formats, let's get into point-and-shoot cameras. These type of cameras have been around for a very long time. giving people the ability to take photos and video without the knowledge of how to actually operate advanced features of the camera. The first point-and-shoot camera was made in 1989 by Fujifilm. Fujifilm released the Fuji X DS-X, the first fully digital camera to be commercially released. It was not great, since it was the first digital version of a camera made. It was not as good as a film camera at the time, but as time continued, the technology evolved. That was point-and-shoot. But what about DSLRs? The digital single-lens reflex camera, DSLR, the first DSLR was made in 1988. When Nikon released the first commercial DSLR camera, the QV-1000C. In 1986, the Kodak Microelectronics Technology Division developed a 1.3 megapixel CCD image sensor, the first with more than 1 million pixels. But this was only for photos. What about the first DSLR that could do video? In the mid-2000s, SLR and DSLR and point-and-shoots had built-in microphones and video recording in early 2008. Nikon released the D90, the first DSLR to feature video recording. Since then, all major companies offer cameras with this functionality. With different types of cameras today, DSLRs are still one of the most popular cameras to buy besides mirrorless cameras. The first mirrorless camera commercially marketed was the Panasonic Lumix DMC-G1, released in Japan in October of 2008. It was the first camera of Micro Four Thirds system, which is a mirrorless, interchangeable lens camera system. It was introduced in 2008 by Panasonic and Olympus. First Micro Four Thirds camera system gives photographers a smaller and more compact alternative to full-frame DSLRs developed exclusively for the mirrorless ILC system around 2009 and 2010. Thank you, expertphotography.com, for that statement. Anyway, mirrorless is still used mainly as a video device because while they can take stunning photos, the shutter is made in the lens, and for some shooters it's just not as fast enough as a regular DSLR. Okay, let's talk about smartphones. The first Android device is the HTC Dream with 192 megabytes of RAM and a whopping 3 megapixel camera. Definitely not as good as we have today, but this is some footage was taken on the HTC Dream. HTC Dream. And here is the video of the phone. Okay, in 2010 this was acceptable. The sensor's resolution was 320 by 480 pixels, which even at the time, standard definition 720p became the new standard around 2009 for regular point and shoots and DSLRs. The size of the BSI sensor is 0.312 inches with an aperture of f/2.4 and a 28mm lens. Okay, that's the first Android smartphone. But what about the first iPhone? The first iPhone doesn't record video. However, it does take still images. I'll put those on screen now.
This is the first ever iPhone. It came out in 2007 to a fair amount of skepticism, but I think it's pretty fair to say that's all mostly subsided as the first iPhone proceeded to completely change the world. If you think I'm being a bit dramatic there, if anything it's an understatement. Seriously, this phone has changed everything. Hey, how's it going? I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and today we're taking a look at the first ever iPhone. It is without a doubt one of the most influential innovations within human history, and so let's see how it holds up and performs over 12 years later. You can see some pictures here. They're unique and kind of cool in that they have that vintage feel to them, but you definitely wouldn't want to be using this phone anymore as your main driver, especially when it comes to the camera. Overall though, I mean, the camera does perform better than I would have expected. Here's a couple comparisons between the iPhone 2G and the 11 Pro Max. Suffice to say, we've come a long way, although at least the 2G is capable of taking photos, even if they aren't spectacular. And you know what, again, they aren't as bad as you would expect.
As you can see, phone cameras were not great by any means, but over time, they did improve. Apple is one of the companies that had a vision for smartphone cameras to be just as good as a camera itself. Over time, Apple's cameras have improved each year, and one of the phones that was the most popular for the camera was the iPhone 6s Plus. For the first time, anyone can make a 4K video on their phone at 60 frames per second. success of the camera on the 6S Plus, Apple made the sensor a little bigger each year and improved their AI to make the images sharper and better looking. In 2019, the new iPhone had built-in stabilization on the sensor, allowing the sensor to move to make the shot look smooth instead of normal image optimization, or known as OIS. Unlike regular image stabilization, moving the sensor allows the camera bump to be smaller, allowing phone camera advancements to keep growing as time passes. The cameras on a smartphone will always improve each year, but these are the most important events that actually change the AV world into what we know today on mobile. Will cameras in phones be just as good as cameras in the future? Let me know down in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching.